Next, we move on to the cabin group. We begin by checking the windshield and windows for cracks, and the seat belts for fraying and security. Then we start at the front of the cabin and work our way back, checking all of the plumbing, filters, instruments, switches, and electrical wiring. Then the controls are checked, including all chains, pulleys, cables, and push rods. Finally, the rudder pedal and brake system is checked, and before we leave the cabin, all of the placards are inspected to make sure that they're properly installed as described in the maintenance manual. Placards are actually a very important part of the annual inspection. Many older aircraft never came with a flight manual. These aircraft are known as placarded aircraft, and the placards installed in the aircraft serve as the primary guide to proper aircraft operations and limitations. In order for the airplane to be airworthy, all of the proper placards must be installed and legible. Once the cabin has been inspected, all of the moving parts are lubricated as called for in the service manual, and the cabin can be put back together. Now we move on to the fuselage and tail section. Many aircraft have the emergency locator transmitter, or ELT, mounted in the tail cone or rear fuselage. The ELT must be tested every year, and the battery must be replaced every 2 years. Your IA will check the battery date, remove and inspect the ELT, and test it according to the manufacturer's instructions. Next, the rudder, elevator, and trim systems are checked for proper clearances and operation, along with the static ports, all antennas, and lights. Again, all moving parts are lubricated as required, and the inspection covers are reinstalled. The wingtips were removed at the beginning to give a clear look inside the wing. Both the interior and exterior of the wing are checked for damage and corrosion. The ailerons and flaps are checked for clearances and condition, and the fuel system is checked, from the fuel caps to the vents and sump drains. Finally, we check the pitot tube, including the pitot heating system, if it's installed. Then we lubricate all of the moving parts as called for in the service manual and close up the wing. Now the plane is jacked up so that we can remove the wheels and inspect the landing gear. If the airplane has retractable landing gear, we begin with a gear retraction test to verify proper operation of the gear retraction and emergency extension systems. Then each wheel is removed and the bearings are cleaned, inspected, and repacked with grease. Next, the brake system is inspected, including the caliper, brake lines, discs, and pads. Everything is checked for excessive wear, leaks, and corrosion. Finally, the struts, bungee cords, or other shock systems are inspected, and the entire system is lubricated as described in the service manual. Then the wheels are reinstalled. Once everything has been put back together, the IA needs to do a second round of operational inspections, just like we did before bringing the plane into the shop. All of the systems are checked, and the results are compared to the notes taken at the beginning of the annual. Finally, the inspection is signed off in the logbooks, and any discrepancies are noted, along with the date and signature of the inspector. Now, it's important that no matter what problems were found during the inspection, the annual inspection is now complete. As we said earlier, according to the FARs, the IA has two options following the inspection. The annual inspection is complete, and the plane is signed off as airworthy, or the inspection is complete, and the owner is provided with a signed and dated list of discrepancies. Either way, the annual inspection is over. Now, it's not always practical to reassemble everything during the inspection if you know that you need to fix something. Inevitably, situations will occur where it makes sense to leave the access covers or cowling off following the inspection in order to fix a problem later. This is fine, as long as you follow the inspection with the proper repairs and documentation returning the aircraft to service. Where many people get into difficulty is when the annual inspection is stopped every time a discrepancy is found in order to fix the problem. In some cases, this makes sense, such as replacing safety wire or putting in new spark plugs. But when larger issues are found, the IA should simply note the discrepancy and move on with the inspection. Otherwise, you can find yourself weeks into work on the airplane and you still haven't completed the inspection. If you complete the inspection as efficiently as possible, you can review the discrepancy list as a whole and develop a plan that you're comfortable with to address all of the discrepancies and return the plane to service. And this is very important because you often have choices about whether to repair or replace a component, and even where you want to have the discrepancy repaired. As long as the inspection is complete, you have the power to choose how to comply with the discrepancy list. If you decide that you'd rather have the plane repaired elsewhere, call your local FAA Flight Safety District office to find out how you can get a ferry permit to move the plane to another shop. After all, it's your plane, and it's up to you to keep it airworthy and to do it in a way that you're comfortable with. So, the annual inspection is complete. If the IA tells you that the aircraft is not approved for return to service and provides you with a discrepancy list, it's important to understand how they arrived at the conclusion that the things on the list make the plane unairworthy. Remember that to the FAA, airworthy means that the aircraft meets its type design and that it's in a condition for safe operation. Determining whether or not an aircraft meets its type design or properly altered condition is very straightforward. Each Class 1 appliance, such as an engine, airframe, or propeller, has a Type Certificate Data Sheet, or TCDS. This sheet lists the required components and configuration for the item. This is what the inspector uses to determine compliance. The appliance being inspected must have all of the required items listed on the TCDS in order to be in compliance. In the case where the appliance has been altered with an STC or field approval, the TCDS information is also modified as spelled out in the alteration paperwork. This alteration could be as simple as a placard being installed and a supplement added to the pilot's operating handbook or approved flight manual. This is often the case with STCs like those that allow auto fuel to be used to replace 80-octane avgas. For many of these installations, no actual modifications to the airframe or engine need to be performed. However, the proper placards must be installed, and the supplement to the approved flight manual must be on board as well. After it's determined that the appliance does conform to its type design, it's inspected for condition. This is to evaluate the wear and tear on the appliance since it left the factory. The manufacturer's service manuals contain guidelines to determine if a particular part or system is functioning correctly and if the wear from use is acceptable. Many components have a table of limits, which gives exact measurements to determine if an item is still serviceable. General guidelines are available if no specific limits are published. If you have questions about something that your mechanic says needs to be replaced, you can always research the legal tolerances yourself. The information is usually published by the manufacturer of the component. For general guidelines on maintenance and tolerances, you can use the AC 4313. This is the FAA's Bible of approved repair procedures for almost any type of general maintenance task. In it, you'll find guidelines for everything from wear tolerances to safety wiring, torque values, aircraft hardware, and structural repairs. Items which are very close to the wear limits are often recommended to be replaced by the inspector because he knows from experience that something such as a tire which is just within limits may be worn excessively in just a few landings. In this case, the inspector could still sign off the item as airworthy, but he might recommend replacement since it won't be airworthy much longer. This is the kind of preventative maintenance that the owner can do to keep the plane in airworthy condition all year long. By watching that tire on each pre-flight, the owner can order a new one and replace it when necessary. In the first volume of the Educated Owner video series, we explained in detail all of the maintenance tasks that the FAA considers legal owner maintenance. And throughout the annual inspection, many of these preventative maintenance tasks, such as lubrication, are required by the aircraft service manual. If you want to bring the cost of the annual inspection down, you can do these tasks yourself. As long as the IA still inspects every item, you can legally do the disassembly, servicing, and reassembly of a number of key components. Wheels are a good example of this. You can legally jack up the aircraft, remove the wheel and bearings, clean everything, and show them to the IA for inspection. Then you can repack the bearings and reinstall the wheel. The IA still needs to inspect the final assembly, but you've just saved him a lot of time and you've saved yourself some money. Other examples of this include spark plug maintenance, battery maintenance, oil changes, and general lubrication.